yet another video. Wow, that's crazy. So this video is going to be about the sliding and driving ILs and the platforming ILs. Why the platforming ILs used to be favored over the sliding and driving ILs, and why they no longer are, hell, haven't been for a long time. We are going to look into that. So, there's a little bit of history. My memory's a little hazy. Hopefully I don't get anything notable wrong. But back in the day, I believe the platforming levels and the sliding and driving levels used to both be on the same leaderboard, I believe. Just on, like, the main boards. And then, in 2017, we made the category extensions boards. I think it was 2017. And I think the platforming levels were put on there, I believe. Actually, no, I think it was the sliding and driving levels. And then... Wait, no, hold on. Yeah, no, the platforming levels got put on there, then the sliding and driving levels, and now, since 2022, they've been swapped back. So, what happened, basically, is that back then, the sliding and driving levels weren't really that interesting, whereas the platforming levels were interesting because they were a different take on all these levels. You know, even now, the vast majority of practically all runners prefer speedrunning the platforming sections over the sliding and driving. And the reason why, generally, is because it's more fun to move SpongeBob and Patrick around, like having full free range and collecting a token a minute or whatever, as opposed to driving or sliding for like 2 minutes to get 1 token. They are slower paced than the platforming levels, and the gameplay is more focused in a way that people generally don't really care for so much. And opinion on them has definitely improved a lot, but back then, especially, they were considered to hinder the game, the sliding and driving levels, more so than they benefited. So, you know, we need to go back to, like, 2016, because even back then, the platforming ILs... I don't even know if sliding and driving ILs existed back then, actually. Either way, you know, once upon a time, the game was pretty different. No major glitches was any percent, and the world record was, well, depending on when in 2016, I think at the end of 2016 it was like a 136 or 5 of 2016, and that back then, well, and before Cole came back in, I believe, October 2016, so before Cole came back, right, the any percent route was filled with sliding and driving levels that people did not care about. You had Sandwich Driving 101, and back then there was no tricks to the level, so it was just, obviously, just driving optimization, nitro management, but there was no trick, it was quite boring. Pretty easy level to drive through, and not really interesting, right? Then, back then, people were warping to SD102 after 3K, because that was considered optimal back then. So back then, your options were either doing SD102 at the end of 3K, or doing it after loading into Nether Men with not enough tokens. So you'd waste a load, a clam animation, and menuing, and it sucked. So nobody wanted to do... Well, people used to delay it as much as they could, and then they finally... the high-level runners finally realized they couldn't get away with it anymore. So they were just doing it at the end of 3K, which means after only like 6 minutes of 3K action, you have to go back to the level you already did. And you have to do time, ring, and macho back then. And they are still in no major glitches to this day, those very tokens. This is the same exact tokens. Although you can do them later in the run now. But yeah, no, back then you had to like just do them like really close to each other. And again, like no tricks, and Ring was even worse for that. And so because there were no tricks, they lasted even longer as well. So imagine it this way, right? You're only doing, with No Cheese and Depression, you know, you're only like 3.5 minutes in, and then you have to do a segment that's like 3 minutes. And instead of having, you know, in the amount of time almost that you got 4 tokens, instead you have to do sandwich driving, which is much more basic in movement and lack of tricks, and you only get 1 token, and then you get like 6 tokens in like 6 to 7 minutes, and then you have to spend like 9 minutes getting another 3 tokens. So the distribution's all messed up, and then right afterwards you have to do Rubber Dub, and Rubber Dub was terrible back then. You had to like hit all the targets. You had to like go around like super casually and hit every target, because back then we used to do 4 targets. 4 tokens in Rubber Dub, in No Major Glitches. So you'd go like all the way around casually, except for like one really, really easy trick that saves like 15 seconds or something. Other than that, it was like super casual. And that segment lasted like 3.5 minutes. That shit sucked. So then you finally get to BBBH, and then what's after BBBH? Weenie. And there were no strats in Weenie either, there still aren't. And back then, the nitro management and stuff was even worse. And that might not sound like a big deal, but that means that people were driving through the level a few seconds slower than we do now. And if you go there again and again and again, those seconds really do pile up. And again, there's just like the distribution issue. Like BBBH was like a 5-minute segment for like 3 tokens, but then Weenie is like a 3-minute segment for 1 token. Then you do a 1-minute segment in Frogfish, and then you do Rock Slide. And Rock Slide was, especially then, was really, really long. I don't remember exactly how long it was, but it was really long. There was no skydive. There was the eel jump, but there was no skydive. There was like the, well, we didn't know the super jump existed, but you go on the pathway to like the super jump. But that only saved a few seconds over the casual way, and then you do the flower jump, which I don't know how much that saves, but that's, you know, that, to be fair, that, yeah, we did flower jump. Yeah, people liked Rock Slide back then just because it was one of the most unique sliding and driving levels, because the others really had nothing going on. And this was back when Rock Slide had like 2 or 3 less tricks than it does now. Like, it was easier in like basically every way compared to now, and there was less strats. It wasn't great. And then finally you have Now the Men and SCDA, but back then our standards were like really low, and we thought Now the Men and SCDA were like extremely hard. We thought they were like super tough as nails hard, even though back then we're doing like no strats. Again, like when the game is in its hardest state possible, you just think that the game's hard. So back then we thought the game was really hard, so you know, a little bit of fatigue, but okay. Then you had Dennis, okay, cool. Then you had Sunday. Back then, Sunday had no strats, and our nitro management was horrible. So Sunday, I mean, we have Fast Goob, I guess, but, you know, that's pretty easy. So Sundays were like a 440 compared to now, where they're like 4 flat, my golders. Yeah, it was pretty terrible. And again, that's really slow. I mean, Now the Men was only like a minute or 2 longer, and you get like 5 tokens. And then, immediately after Sunday is Gesk. And Gesk it was and still is good. Gesk was pretty much uncontested best sliding and driving level back then. Whereas now there'd be a bit of contention. There are differences between then and now, though. It was kind of arguably more interesting back then, honestly, because, okay, the faucet route back then was a few seconds slower, so, you know, there's that, but that's not a big thing. The target route, visually, is very different. However, the old one was a little slower, but more involved, and at a high level, you do a trick called Lamp Jump, and it doesn't exist anymore, so we found a way to make it easier, less visually interesting, and faster. So guess was kind of better then than it is now, not gonna lie. But people were already so sick of the sliding and driving levels back then, at that point, that you get kind of sick of it by then. And then you do Dentist 2, which is super short, and then you do Guess 2, and it is still the exact same as in No Major Glitches, still got like the exact same strats with like guess jumps. But if you aren't doing guess jumps, then it's just an extremely easy 5.5 minutes of your life that you will not get back. And yeah, to this day, if you don't do guess jumps, then it's a very boring segment. 5.5 minutes, you know, without strats, it's the fastest sliding and driving level by a lot. That helps it a lot, but like, it's still a lot. And then, after that, back in the day, then you would do the 3 rubber dub tokens afterwards. And back then, dumb jump was considered hard. So we did have dumb jumps. We had a strat, but people hated it. And you still had to do a ring challenge in between, and that ring challenge is like 3 minutes 15 or something. It's really long. And it was just choke central. Then you'd finally be done with all the sliding and driving stuff except for Knucklehead, which is actually pretty similar to how it is now, but again, now we've just had like better movement, better nitro management. But essentially, like, I think it's pretty easy to see why people didn't like that stuff, because they were all, you know, they were all super long for how many tokens you'd get, like super long. And it was just really, it kind of makes sense why people didn't like the sliding and driving levels back then. And if people hated them in runs, what was the incentive to do it outside of runs? You know what I mean? Like, back then they had like no strats and people didn't really care for like the optimization of these levels. They were seen as easier as well than the platforming sections. So why people had the idea that it wasn't worth optimizing your movement in those segments because the movement was easier than in the platforming levels, and you know, people just wanted to focus on that stuff. It was easier to save time in these platforming levels by getting better movement and optimizing strats and stuff compared to just grinding these sliding and driving levels that nobody wanted to play anyway. It's why categories like Extended Sheep Percent and like AWT came into existence. Literally, those categories were made to try and get rid of all sliding and driving possible because people had such a negative view on it. And this is important because then it makes you realize why the platforming ILs were favored instead. Now, not all of them. People didn't like doing certain ones like Plank or whatever, but, you know, people weren't ever, like, deeply in love with them. But Depression in particular had seen, you know, quite a lot of action. All extras didn't used to exist in the ILs, by the way. It was just all tokens and 100%. Back then. I think the all extras has only been a thing for like a couple of years, like 2 or 3 years. But yeah, people like these because it was a different take on what they already knew. It was just a fun little challenge, right? Because, you know, Depression kind of had, you know, a bad rep. But, like, what made it a lot more fun was just being able to warp to each individual token without having to worry about no cheese or anything, and just being able to just grind attempts. It was kind of fun. And same goes for even some levels like 3K. People, you know, I should say these, platforming levels are not the same as, you know, how they would be done in a run, because you have access to all of the cheats, which includes the Unlock All Tasks cheat. So this is never going to reflect, like, how you actually play these, except for, to an extent, BBBH 100%. That one's not 100% identical, but that one is pretty damn similar. But, yeah, like, that's, like, the most similar one. The rest of them are pretty different. But still, they were seen, at least they were seen as better and more worth your time than the sliding and driving levels. People had such a boner for platforming back then, even if you were just warping to a token and just doing a thing for like 20 seconds and then grabbing a token. However, the sliding and driving levels were evolving. They evolved and they became a lot more interesting especially ever since people actually started going for world records again since like 2018. When people started to find strats. And the thing is with the platforming levels, I was gonna save this for later, but I should say this now, so that I don't forget. Is this playing audio? Okay, good, it's not. So basically, the sliding and driving levels kept evolving, but the platforming levels were not evolving very much at all. And you know how I said you can warp anywhere you want? That's kind of the problem. That kind of is the issue. That you can warp anywhere. When you can warp anywhere, like, then the way that you approach a token from between 2016 and now is most likely going to be at least relatively similar. Our sliding and driving levels, and I take a little bit of credit for this. From like, well, when I came back to the game in 2020, I was going ham in the game in a way that no one else really ever had. I was really going ham, and I was getting a lot of sliding and driving golds, and I feel like that made people realize that, wow, we still have a lot, like, it's surprising how much time you can save in these levels. We should really be looking into this more. I remember when I came back, and my knuckleheads were pretty unoptimized, because I remember, this is gonna be hyperbole, but I remember talking to runners in like 2018 and just being like, yeah, I just don't really have like I've never really practiced knucklehead, I just do whatever looks fast or whatever, and it's like, then I optimize my nitro route and I save like 3 or 4 seconds, like, because then I'm actually like using nitros properly in the park and stuff, and just like cutting corners well. So I feel like that helped, show why they matter, like why, getting into the, little nitty-gritty matters. And then people, well, not since then, but since before then, but especially from 2020 onwards, people really started, like, grinding the sliding and driving levels. And, oh yeah, I forgot to say this. In late 2016, for no major glitches, Rubber Dub stopped being 4 tokens, it was 2 tokens now. And Sandwich Driving was not done after 3K, it was done after Weenie, which was a lot better, even if it still sucked. But yeah, since then, a lot of stuff got found. At this point, when people began favoring the sliding and driving levels, it was like 2019. It was kind of like 2018, but it was like, it really took off in 2020. So, in 2020, like, what stuff got found? Well, also the ring, yeah, people don't really care for the ring challenges, by the way. That got added in, like, 2020, I think, but yeah, mostly just pay attention to the time challenges. What got found at that point, except for, like, just, like, little nitty-gritty optimization stuff? Well, Gesk got a little damage thingy, like a faster way of doing guest jumps that was like super impressive. Guest jumps have always been a thing, pretty much, but it was a lot more, it was cool to see them done so perfectly in an IL, especially with that damage stuff to like get a quick death on the TNT. Sunday got Sunday jumps in 2018, and they were very, very hard. Nobody did them in runs until 2021, in fact. I fucking hate doing Sunday jumps, I always miss them. And obviously, again, the Nitro route got a lot better. Rock Slide got Skydive. And, a second Super Jump. And yeah, that's basically it. But again, like, the nitty-gritty shit. So these levels were still able to get optimized, and more strats got found, so they were taking up a lesser percentage of the run. Right? But the real big thing, that really helped people's opinions on the sliding and driving levels, well, to an extent, we'll get into that, but what helped was Mindy Skip. Because Mindy Skip created a new category called No Pause Storage, obviously at the time any percent, and that category removed some sliding and driving, and I feel like it helped people realize something. So, on the one hand, yes, it is true that people still had like a negative view of sliding and driving levels in the sense that they saw no pause storage as an objectively better category in their eyes. They couldn't comprehend how it wasn't objectively better. They thought it was objectively better because it had less sliding and driving. Mostly. It also removed Depression Combat, which people didn't really care about, and Playing SpongeBob, which people thought was pretty hard, so they didn't really like it very much. And to be fair, yeah, it's pretty hard. But yeah, Mindy Skip removed Sandwich Ring and Macho, which is enormous, especially back then when there were no strats in the level. So that is huge. And it removed Guess Ring and Macho. And Guess Ring has a thing called Fake Ring, where you can pass through a ring, and the game just doesn't detect it. It can only happen in Guess. And if that happens, then most likely run over. It can happen on, like... It can only happen on moving rings, and it can only happen when the rings are moving left or right. But it can happen on, like, ring, like, 6, or it could happen on, like, one of the very last rings. But most of the time, it happened on the red wire, which is, like, over a minute in. That was another reason why people were pretty negative towards the sliding and driving levels. Even Guess 2 had that huge problem, and it was really discouraging. But even if you weren't doing guess jumps, then it was still cringe, because it's like... You just get, like, punished for, like, literally no reason. You didn't do anything wrong, like, you know. Oh yeah, at this point in time, by the way, before Mindy Skip, the sliding and driving levels, I calculated before, but I don't remember the exact, you know, percentage. The sliding and driving levels, I think, took up 42% of the run, assuming the platforming and the sliding and driving was all perfect. I think I estimated 42% of the run. And after Mindy Skip, it was actually like 41%. But that's because it also replaced other tokens as well, and the total run length shortened by over 18 minutes. So that's why. But yeah, so it removed 2 Guess tokens and 2 Sandwich Driving tokens. And yeah, Guess Macho, but to be like, repeating tokens sucks. And again, on the one hand, like I said, people had a pretty negative view towards sliding and driving levels, but I feel like it also helped them gain a new appreciation for them, in the sense that, at least to me, it made me realize that sliding and driving tokens weren't the problem. The problem was the repetition of the tokens, right? Because, again, and then we find even more strats. Like, well, again, there's like Skydive and the second Super Jump and Rock Slide. It's a lot more interesting now. At this point in 2020, I just automatically like Rock Slide quite a bit more now, especially because I didn't just do, you know, 4 Sandwich Driving tokens before it. There's bigger gaps in between the sliding and driving tokens, and the only ones now in the run that you repeat are Sandwich Driving, Rubber Dub, and Guess. And Guess pretty much doesn't count, because Guess 2 is very, very, very different to Guess 1. And yes, if you're not doing Guess jumps, then it's just a minute and a half of cringe filler. But if you're doing Guess jumps, it is a completely unique challenge and is fast and doesn't take up a lot of time. If anything, it only takes like a little longer than like a normal platforming token, and is 1 frames evolved. So no one had a problem with that at that point. So Guess 2 at this point is a non-factor in like saying like what's bad about the sliding and driving levels. Yes, it's a repeated token, but it's completely different. And it's super challenging, and it doesn't even take up a lot of time. So no one has an issue with that. You know, So no one has a problem with that at all, which is great. So the only real tokens that are getting repeated are Sandwich Driving and Rubber Dub, and they are done back to back and immediately after Weenie, so that does kind of suck. And then you just do Frogfish, and then you go to Rock Slide. So it's still a little cringe, but still not as bad as before. And it removed all of the sliding and driving ring challenges. In fact, no pulse storage removed it. No major glitches had 5 ring challenges, and no pulse storage removed all of them. There's literally 0 ring challenges. None of them even would be fast, except for Depression Guitar, but, we don't have Guitar, and then by the time we get it, we just book it to Neptune. Maybe if we could, ever, imagine if we could stop the challenge without Guitar. Damn, that'd be pretty fast. But yeah. So at this point, people are having a nicer opinion on the sliding and driving levels. And this was also when people really started, grinding. It was in 2020 when people really started, going ham. Only a few people, but still, they're going ham on these sliding and driving levels. Kyoku and Latte, for example. Those two were the big ones. Fuck, who was the... I swear there was, 1 or 2 other people. I can't remember who you are, sorry. Sad face. But yeah. These sliding and driving levels already had evolved at this point in time. But it gets even better. Because then, Sandwich Driving gets a complete transformation with Sandwich Out of Bounds. Sandwich Out of Bounds is done differently in full game runs. I mean, there were many variations of the trick. But this one has basically, has practically always been the way it is. So let me just show you. I know I didn't, show what the other tricks were, but this is when they really starts mattering. I'm not going to go in super detail, but basically, it's extremely hard. You barely go over an invisible wall. You touch a checkpoint trigger because, you need to. And then you nitro across to the other side. And you didn't make a mistake there, but the point is, that completely changed the level. It made it go from, really easy to just, stupidly difficult. And when this happened, people, people really started respecting the ILs for these levels, and this isn't, the only one, but this is, the big one for now. The way that it's done RTA, well, it's gone through a few versions. First we had the fence method, which is when you'd, grab the checkpoint over here, come back, bonk on this dirt pile, and then reverse on this fence, and it was, the worst trick in the world, and made me want to quit the damn game. But it's still, give people, at least outsiders, bad appreciation for the trick. Then we found the bulldozer method, which was grabbing the checkpoint again, coming back here, nitroing on this dirt pile, and then going across like that. That one was consistent, and pretty cool. But now, the way that we do it is nitroing on this immediately, going here, nitroing on this dirt pile, landing in the red building out of bounds, grabbing the checkpoint, then nitroing back on the dirt pile to the other side. Compared to not doing the trick at all, it saves 16 seconds. And this saves God, I don't even know, it saves 20. It saves a lot. Yeah, very crazy, very fast trick. And that was huge, right? And again, I feel like it really just helped change people's opinions a little bit on these sliding and driving levels. It showed people that these levels really can be cool as long as they're not fucking repeated. But even this helped tremendously. I burped. This helped tremendously with even just the SD102. Because even though you're doing the same exact thing twice, you're still doing a very hard trick. And that is notable. So, again, nobody wants to do it twice, and only the high-level runners are going to do the trick anyway. But the trick does exist. It is humanly viable. It automatically improves the opinion of the trick, of the level, and it especially improves the opinion of going there the second time. It still sucks, but it really made a big difference. So, again, sandwich driving isn't really fixed at this point, but it definitely has been improved significantly. And to this day, that is still how the trick is done. Well, the method that I explained, like the fastest one, RTA, I don't... Yeah, that was discovered in, like, 2023. But, yeah, at this point, I think it was late 2021, actually, is when the fence method was considered. Or it might have been 2020. Honestly, I can't remember. God, there was a Watch Mojo video in the recommended in the featured videos thingy then. And another thing gets found. Not going to go into a lot of detail about this. This is not RTA viable, but it helps people appreciate the ILs. Is park out of bounds. It's not RTA viable whatsoever, though. And, you know, you nitro, get a perfect bounce, and you land on the other side. So that's a big skip, saves like 5 seconds. So now we go back. And, you know, you might think, what's the point of all this? But, like, you'll definitely realize. And then, Knucklehead. Was it Knucklehead next? Yeah, Knucklehead. You can do that same park out of bounds in Knucklehead, except it's even harder. So then people just respected that even more. It is not RTA viable either. However, the next thing we're going to talk about was huge for people's impressions, people's opinions on the sliding and driving levels. This is Rubber Dub. It is 26 seconds long. Not going to go into very much detail about this either, and it's very hard to describe, but you build up speed on this rail as little as you possibly can. So, first of all, you get a 1-frame turnaround. Then you build up like as little speed as possible, and then you press A on like an exact frame as well, so it's like 2 1-frames, and then you'll just barely make it over to the other side. This is how you do it in ILs, though. But still, basically, like, yeah, so Rubber Dub Skip is different in full game runs, but I can show you what it looks like really quick. And again, this was massive, and you will probably understand in a second. So, in the first task of Rubber Dub, you spawn in midair. So I'm gonna like jump back a bit, and then I'm gonna build up speed, and then you start holding forward, and then you go like down, and then you jump like just after the rail. This, if done in both Rubber Dubs, saves an estimated 3 minutes and 15 seconds about. Every miss is like 15 seconds, though. And this made Rubber Dub, I can't exactly remember what my old gold was, but I think it was like a 236 or something. So my gold went from like a 236, 235 to a 50.9. Actually insane. And the trick is really hard. You know, Dumb Jump was not very hard. You'd occasionally miss it, but that was once every like 15 times or 20 times. This is actually hard. I've poured more than 6,000 attempts into this fucking trick. And there are still days where I just cannot get it to work. If I miss it once, then a domino effect kicks in where I just keep fucking missing it. And this was so big. This got found in 2022, at the end of August. And that's not all. Like, okay, already you realize now, like, oh wow, this means that Rub-a-Dub 2 is also really fast, which kind of makes it, even though it is the same thing again, it's sort of a non-issue, because who cares? It's only taking up 50 seconds of your life. But it gets better. It's better than that. Right? Even though it's very similar, it still has a very big distinction. A very skill-based distinction that you will see right now. That was a lot of skill in one go. So when you spawn in the second token, or the fourth one, you don't spawn in midair. So I had to otherwise I'd lose like 7 or 8 seconds. So to do it as fast as possible, I get a 1-frame jump, and then I do another 1-frame jump, and then I build up speed. I don't think I got the wood 1-frame. No, I didn't. But basically, point being, this, my gold is a 56. And with 1-frame jumps, which can also fuck your camera angle and make the Rub-a-Dub skip attempt even harder, this is even more impressive than in Rub-a-Dub 1. It's a little longer, but only by 6 seconds. You can't really complain. They both total to less than 2 minutes of gameplay. These 2 tokens are faster than the average platforming token. That's insane. And again, a percentage hasn't been worked out since 2020. I would like to do it again. But like, other levels have made improvements too, of course, but the sliding and driving levels have all gone faster, Sandwich out of bounds, all the rock slides stuff, again, just small nitro management shit. And then Rub-a-Dub skip is a really big one, because now, yes, there is a Rub-a-Dub 2 and Rub-a-Dub 1, but again, we've already kind of established at this point that doing one sliding and driving token is not really a proper issue. People still prefer the platforming, but now it's gone from like a horrible sight that nobody wants to see to like something that's still respected, Repeating the tokens is the issue, but this is a non-issue because it takes a minute, and it's even harder this time. So you can't really complain. Nobody's going to complain about this. It's very fast. So now, in 2023, the only bad token we have in the entire run is Sandwich Driving 102, and you still do a hard, impressive, cool trick. That's a pretty good issue to have. I would love to replace this token, SD102, with something, but it'll probably, unfortunately, never happen, because we desperately need 20 tokens for Now That We're Men. That is, and while it's a very slow token, it's the slowest backtracking token in the run, we still really need it, so, for 20 tokens in Now That We're Men. So unless we can do that guitar thing that I was talking about earlier, that'd be pretty cool. Or, if we could somehow bypass the token requirements, but then that might cause its own problems. But yeah, essentially, Rub-a-Dub 2 is now a non-issue. It's so fast and very difficult. Not a problem anymore. And makes people respect this shit even more. Especially with, like, how hard it is, especially to do it as optimally as I do. A lot of people don't do it as optimally as me. A lot of runners in Rub-a-Dub 2 will just instantly just, like, die and get grabbed by Hans. They won't even try to do the 1-frame jumps, because then if you mess them up and then get grabbed by Hans, you'll just lose an extra 2 seconds or a second for no reason. And they will do a slower Rub-a-Dub skip than me. Compared to, like, the really safe, well, I say really safe, but the much safer Rub-a-Dub skip method, I save like 2 or a second and a half over that. But yeah, anyway, yeah, so Rub-a-Dub got a lot better, and I'm not even done. I'm not even done. There's still, like, one more thing to show with the sliding and driving levels. And that would be in Sunday. Now, Sunday has a big problem, unfortunately. You can't do basically fuck all in this level until halfway through lap 2 because of Goofy Goober. You see this peanut guy on his dumb little unicycle? He's the problem. So, Goob, you just have to follow him around technically, but there are triggers around the level, and if you do not go through these triggers before Goob goes through like certain triggers or whatever, then you fail. And you can only start cheesing him on lap 2 onwards, because on lap 2 and 3 there are less triggers to check where you're going compared to lap 1. Lap 1 is like the nasty one. So you're going a very generic path. As a matter of fact, right? There's a tunnel shortcut here that saves like 15 seconds or a dozen seconds or something, and you cannot go through it because you'll fail. That sucks. And then you have to just keep following him. And then you have to go this way, even though it's like really slow. Look at all this. You could have just skipped like all of that, but nope. But again, we have a trick called Fast Goob, and you can pass him from here onwards. And immediately after, we do a trick called Spiral Skip. And that saves 8.5 seconds each if done perfectly. Not super hard, although the original setup was terrible. You just nitro to the right of this, but not too far off or too close of the pole. And then you want to make sure you have a good angle, or else like you can fall into the pit, you could get a really big height boost and lose a bunch of time. You could accidentally like be stuck in the grass and then lose a few seconds. A lot can happen, or you can just get pushed back in bounds. A lot can happen, but generally it'll be fine if you've practiced this. Point being, you do this on lap 2 and 3, and this saves, therefore then, a total of about 18 seconds. And Sunday suddenly goes from like a really slow level to a pretty fast level. I mean, it's still the slowest sliding and driving level in speedruns because of Goob. If we can ever find a way to get past him, we'd save, like, loads of time. It's literally save, like, 40 seconds or something. But yeah, like, keep in mind, I think back in the day, Rockslide was, like, 4 minutes or something, and now it's, like, 3:36 is my gold. Sunday was, like, 4:30 something, and now my gold is 4 flat point 2. And obviously I can get 3:59. And the IL was affected even more so by this. Because it doesn't have to worry about Goob, because it's just a time challenge. So, you get to do Sunday Jump and Spiral Skip on all 3 laps, which means you're doing 6 tricks in total. So these ILs are fucking bonkers, you know? At this point, like, they're just bonkers. Like, even Rockslide, the IL was different to the beginning. Again, normally you spawn in midair and then you could just jump backwards, but otherwise, in the IL, like, you do this. That was really hard and the 1 frame was involved. Yeah, so these ILs have really been pushed, right? And that is evident from the fact that, like, all of these sliding and driving ILs, all of these world records come from 2022 or later, except for Gesk. And that was always impressive anyway. Now, I've been talking about just the sliding and driving levels practically for a really long time, but that's to show you why sliding and driving levels weren't appreciated back in the day. Then people realized, as more things got discovered and because of Mindy Skip and stuff, realized that the issue was the repetition, and these tricks are beginning to solve that. And now the only bad one is sandwich driving, and it's not even that bad. It's just kind of bad. Now, in all of this time, what about the ILs? Well, the ILs, ever since, like, 2018 or something, fell the fuck off. Because, again, there isn't even that much to optimize, and what there is to optimize are segments that people don't like doing, or levels that people don't like doing. Let's take an example, right? SCDA 100% by me. Okay. When was this done? March 29th, 2020 with my really old layout. I bet you this run sucks, but nobody wants to do it because it sucks, you know, toast early. Nobody wants to do fucking toast early. Nobody wants to do, like, perfect 3-meter. Nobody wants to do, like, loading block with the, you know, 100%, other than depression, were never popular, and no cheese were never popular with the platforming aisles. Because even though people liked the platforming, they didn't like collecting the extras. They liked doing stuff that was as familiar as possible to, like, their runs, which is, you know, but obviously back then was any percent. And you weren't collecting extras in any percent. The most popular ones were these, but even then, people were so... And again, people were really negative about the sliding and driving levels, but honestly, people were really fucking picky about the game in general. You know, people could barely stand any percent sometimes, it felt like. But with the platforming tokens, you could avoid, like, pretty much all the bad platforming tokens. So people were pretty into it. But when you do a level like BBBH, which, by the way, my time is from March 28th, 2020, you know what this has, right? This has guitar. Not guitar, why'd I say guitar? I'm stupid. It has BBBH combat, and people are picky, and they don't want to do BBBH combat because it kind of sucks. Right? So, people obviously didn't mind doing no cheese, but that doesn't really count. I mean, it's just one token. People like doing depression, okay. People like doing 3K, okay. But people didn't want to do PBPH, or Now That We're Men, or Plank, not those two, no, BBBH and Now That We're Men because of the combat arenas. And then people didn't want to do SCDA because, I don't know, hard, I guess, I don't know. People, some people have done Plank. But yeah, this is a case of people being really picky. So it wasn't just about the sliding and driving levels. They were just able to... The cat at any percent just so happened to just not really have any bad tokens. And again, like, you click any of these and they're all super old. Wait, I was already on BBBH. 3K. I think this is one of my most recent ones, and it's from fucking March 2021, and is one of my most recent ones. And that's another thing. Again, when you warp to just token after token after token, the routing can only change so much. The routing has changed in some ways, but not in any big ways outside of, like, depression with, like, extra. Again, a lot of the routing stuff would have been with, like, some extras or whatever, but a lot of people just didn't care. And, you know, even in something like 3K, people just liked it as, like, a side attraction thing, whereas, so nobody really grinded it, you know what I mean? But yeah, like, then, so all it took was for somebody of, like, a high skill level to just do a few attempts, and then suddenly you have a time that nobody else wants to compete with. Also, another thing, 2-frame tokens kind of fucked ILs. 2-frame tokens have existed since 2016. I'm not getting into the whole thing about them, but they are way harder than you'd think for 2 frames. And the hitboxes are pretty deceiving. There's certain levels, like 3K, where you can 2-frame most of the tokens. Nobody wanted to play against that, doing that many 2 frames in a row. And it got improved with buffers, but at that point, people just stopped caring about ILs and were looking at the sliding and driving levels. So yeah, that was why people didn't like playing Plank, and, like, even some people didn't even want to do, like, 3K and BBBH and stuff because they just didn't want to do all those 2 frames. And then when you had the buffers, you know, they're OG exclusive, and at that point it was too late anyway. The all extras version of these categories is probably the best, honestly, in my opinion, but they have some pretty cancerous strats on their own. Some of them are pretty cool, granted. Some of them are pretty fucking AIDS, like, this one, and this shows, you know, I don't want to be this one. I wanted a whole streak of world records on the ILs, but I don't want to, mainly because of this, because it sucks, it's so bad. It has, like, 2 things that are terrible. This one is this. And that is extremely inconsistent, and I don't know why, but it's supposed to do this, basically. But it's so inconsistent. And then... oh wait, he actually didn't get it in this run. But... it's possible to get a bounce off the trampoline during the cutscene, but it's an extremely specific angle, and you're incredibly unlikely to actually get it. I've never gotten it in runs before. And yeah, like, it just kind of... and also, there's another reason why ILs are discouraging in a way that has not been explained yet. So, this might be a little complicated, but time starts when you gain equivalent control in the level. Like, you're supposed to behave like you just entered the level. And what people do to get an equivalent of this, if they've set stuff up beforehand, is to unpause from a menu, and then that's when time would start. And then time ends on touching the final token or extra. Like, collecting the final extra or just touching the final token. So... that might not seem like a big deal. Like, oh, well, Rock Slide IL was a 308. What if you have to reset, like, 2.5 minutes in or whatever? Like, well, this only takes, like, a minute to get to the point that you said was really, really inconsistent, that stupid strat. Yeah, you know, that's true. But ILs take longer to reset in, and that's a big thing that I'm surprised it took me this long to say. And that's kind of the final nail in the coffin, is that these are not easy to set up. It's easier than, like, battle ILs, but it still sucks. I mean, here's what you do if you have already made progress in a level to the point where you can't reload it and just, you know, act like you never were here, you know? What you have to do is quit the game, sit through a loading screen, start a new game, so you sit through no cheese, you skip a couple cutscenes, then you put in the unlock all task cheat, and then the unlock all moves cheat, whether regular or macho. And depending on if you're doing a combat one, you kind of want to use the max health cheat as well. So that's another cheat code. And then you warp to the level of your destination, and then, you know, you need to cancel Mindy's text box or whatever, and then time can start. And then, imagine, like... what's a really good example? With some of them, you can kind of create an equivalent. But let's say you, like, spawn the plank bungee token and then miss the 2-frame. You can't just reload back to the beginning and just pretend you didn't do it. No, the token's still there. We can see that it's still there. So, you'd have to quit the game and just set it all up. You know what happens if you fuck up a sliding or driving level? You press start, you reload, sit through a load, you talk to Mindy for like 2 seconds, and then you load him back in. That is a lot nicer to set up. And on emulator, you can even set a save state to make it even faster. And on Xbox, you can reload using hard drive to make the load even faster. And you could say, oh, well, on GameCube, you can reload a state in the ILs as well. Yeah, but why would you do ILs? Oh, no, this is the actual final nail in the coffin. Why would you... why wouldn't you be able to do it in ILs? Because the loads are really slow on GameCube. And GameCube is the only allowed emulator, Dolphin, for movie, because the PS2 emulator is inaccurate, and the Xbox one is currently bad and inaccurate. Anyway, even when you try to load a state on Xbox Emu, it crashes like a quarter of the time anyway. But yeah, no, this is the action... well, this is the other final nail in the coffin, I suppose. To play at a decent competitive level, because these levels have a lot of loads, you need to play on Xbox, either OG or 360, because of 2 frames, you want to play on OG. Whereas with the sliding and driving levels, okay, yeah, sure, the driving levels are faster on GameCube, but you can just use Dolphin. Everybody can get a copy of, find an ISO of the game and download Dolphin. And then, for the sliding levels, Yeah, I mean, GameCube is viable for sliding levels. You don't have to use them for sliding levels, but for guess it's objectively better. And you don't... And the frame rate's the same between Xbox and GameCube in the Rubber Dub and Rockside, but it doesn't matter. You can play them on Xbox or GameCube, it doesn't matter. Or PS2. So even though the driving levels do have exclusivity, it's exclusivity in the perfect way because it literally just doesn't matter. Which is especially good, because out of the 4 driving levels, 2 of them you want to use PAL for. PAL GameCube, and a lot of people are not from the PAL region, so... Yeah, just download a PAL ISO. I mean, what's stopping you? You know? It's such a non-issue. Everybody has Dolphin downloaded. It doesn't take long to find an ISO. And then you can just reload a state. And then you can be super mega fast on the resets. So resetting is significantly faster. And, you know, the sliding and driving aisles are effectively not console exclusive in a way that actually matters. Oh yeah, there is another thing as well. Because, and even the driving levels, there is still merit to playing them on Xbox. Because, obviously, again, we have now taken the sliding and driving levels more seriously, so people do use them for practice. And, again, like, the sandwich out of bounds on Xbox is different from the one on GameCube, so if you want to practice that one, you can do ILs of that one. People understand that it's its own distinct thing, that has its own merits, and is worth practicing. Same goes with some other strats too. Even if you're not gonna do the quick death setup and guess, it's still good to practice the 1-frame jumps. You know, Knucklehead, it's good to practice just nitro movements and stuff in general, even if you're not gonna do park out of bounds. Especially, like, because I've grinded the hell out of 100% on all tokens, so you know, I want to be you know, so stuff like Sunday Time Challenge does matter to me. So I personally don't feel the need to go for world record on GameCube for any of those driving levels. I just want to get really good times for my skill level on Xbox because people know the differences between the two sandwiches, so they don't care. Like, they'll still respect your time anyway, and it's just good practice for you. So even if you do need to play on Xbox, it's like, yeah, I mean, some of the strats aren't RTA viable anyway, so go nuts. It's not even an issue. Whereas here, you'd want to do everything in the platforming level that you do on Xbox. You want to do them all on GameCube. It would be harder and slower. There's no reason to. It would just be really discouraging, especially because the loads are so damn long. And I think that's basically it. 58 minutes. I hope I didn't forget anything. The TLDR... The driving levels were considered cringe because there was, like, no strats, they were too slow, like, just a lot of work for just, like, only a token or whatever. And the platforming levels were just seen as, like, a nice little break and some decent practice, but then people started respecting the sliding and driving levels more, the less backtracking there was, and the more strats that were added, especially because, even though the platforming levels did have some change, there are some of them that have had, like, basically no change, or, like, very little change. And people were picky, and they didn't want to do combat arenas, and they just, you know, didn't want to 2-frame all those tokens. And a lot of people just don't want to play, you know, don't have access to an OG. And even if they do, maybe they have, like, a slow OG or something anyway, like a Thompson. Whereas the sliding and driving ILs, you know, a good practice for people just going for IL world records, or just going for, you know, just trying to improve the segments for RTA. You know? Anyway, I think that's everything. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.